Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. All of us know the difference between good and evil. We know the difference between right and wrong, what should be done and what should not be done. We don't need a scripture or a law to tell us. We know how it feels to be hurt, to have our loved ones hurt, and to have our lives violated, abused, or manipulated. When Europe was terrorized by Hitler, the world supported the Allied efforts to rid the world of this evil tyrant, in much the same way we stand today at various crossroads of good and evil. And at times it's hard to understand who is in the right and who is in the wrong, especially when the news and information we get is manipulated and distorted by diverse parties and opinions that think they know the truth and that want to disseminate that version, their version, often letting us become brainwashed puppets in their hands. Now, I'm not going to get into one side of the discussion or the other, but I'm going to focus this very topic back to another time, another place. In today's episode of the Bhagavatam, we will hear about the death of one of the most evil people that lived on this earth. Ancient texts like the Vedas record the way he tormented, abused, and tortured people, and how the Supreme Being, the God of all gods, Bhagavan, came to this world 5,000 years ago to annihilate such evil, troublemakers, and to bring peace and prosperity to humanity. In the Bhagavad Gita, he says, he comes millennium after millennium to protect the devotees and his loved ones and rid the world of evil. With that, let's get started. In the last episode, we heard about how Krishna, the Supreme Godhead, and his brother Balaram and their friends entered the beautiful city of Mathura. Mathura is near New Delhi in India. And this was 5,000 years ago, around 3000 BC. So they entered the beautiful city of Mathura with its tall gates, household entrances made of crystal, immense archways and doorways made of gold. It talks about an extremely prosperous civilization, unlike what you find happened in the past 100 years when India was invaded by for over 1,000 years and looted and all the wealth taken out of there, leaving millions of people devastated, poor, homeless, starving. This was deliberately done by invaders who came from the Mughals to the British. But we're reading about a time before all of that, a time when India was one of the richest countries in the world, just like America is today. So it describes here in the city of Mathura that the homes had columned balconies and ornate rafters adorned with precious gemstones. There were beautiful public gardens and parks and mansions with private pleasure gardens. And one could hear the sound of peacocks and turtle doves who sat in the openings of the lattice windows. So this is the scene that Krishna and Balaram are seeing as they enter into the city of Mathura. They've come from Vrindavan or Braj, where they were living, a small village, where they were as cowherd men taking care of cows. And now they've come to the big city. They've been invited by the king, Kans, whose plan all along has been to kill Krishna. This evil king is the one we were talking about, who has been tormenting people all through his reign. It then says here that all the royal avenues and commercial streets were sprinkled with water, as were the side roads and courtyards, just to keep everything cool. And in that environment, Krishna and Balaram entered the city of Mathura. So that's Krishna in bluish color, and that's his brother Balaram in a whitish hue. Now, when the women of Mathura heard that Krishna and Balaram were entering the city, they rushed to their balconies to catch a glimpse of these two amazing boys whom they had heard so much about. Yes, I know we've read part of this last time, but I'm just summarizing it to give you the background, just in case you didn't hear last time's episode. And in their haste, these were the women left behind their cooking and their household chores and their babies. And if they'd been getting dressed, they even wore one earring or one ankle bell and forgot to wear the other. And they left their makeup half done and rushed out to see Krishna and Balaram. They came out to the balconies of their homes, and they marveled at the good fortune of the ladies of Braja or Vrindavan, where Krishna and Balaram were living and where they'd come from. Because those women saw Krishna and Balaram, who were this most beautiful sight for the eyes, and they would see them every day. But now the ladies of Mathura were getting their first chance to behold this incredible beauty, the most incredible source of attraction in the world, in the universe. For the first time they had the good fortune to behold the Lord of the universe, and seeing him their hearts melted, and they took him into their heart through their eyes and embraced him, while all the symptoms of ecstasy appeared on their bodies. The boys were then greeted by the king's washerman. There was a guy who washes all the clothes for the king, who insulted them brazenly. And then Krishna, with a touch of his fingertips, separated the man's head from his body. And then he and his friends dressed in the king's opulent clothing. They were then met by a man who made garlands, and he received them in quite the opposite way, with tremendous love and affection. He gave them all fragrant garlands to wear, and Krishna blessed him with all kinds of incredible blessings of long life and peace and happiness and wealth and everything else, all of which the man enjoyed for the rest of his life. So with that, we come into Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, text 42, or chapter 42, the breaking of the sacrificial bow. As the boys walked down the king's road, Krishna saw a young hunchback woman with an attractive face. She was walking and carrying a tray of fragrant ointments. So she was hunchbacked. And the bestower of the ecstasy of love, Krishna, smiled and inquired from her as follows. He said, "Who are you, O beautiful one?" Remember, she's a hunchbacked woman, right? And she is clearly got some kind of, deformities. But he says, "Who are you, O beautiful woman?" He sees the beauty in her. He says, ointment. Who is it for, dear lady? Please tell us truthfully. Give us both some of your finest ointment, these perfumes and creams that she had, and you will soon gain a great boon. The woman, her name is Trivakra, said, "O handsome one, I am a maidservant of King Kans." This is the king of the town, right? She's his maidservant, and she says, "He highly regards me for the ointments I make." These ointments are like perfumes that you put on yourself. "My name is Trivakra. Who else but you two deserve my ointments?" Which the king likes so much. Her mind, overwhelmed by Krishna's beauty, charm, sweetness, smiles, words, and glances, Trivakra gave the brothers generous amounts of the ointment, anointed with these most excellent cosmetics, which adorned them with hues that contrasted with their complexions. The two brothers appeared extremely beautiful. Krishna was pleased with Trivakra, and so he decided to straighten that hunchback girl with the lovely face, just to demonstrate the result of seeing him. Pressing down on her toes with both his feet, Krishna placed one upward pointing finger of each hand under her chin and straightened up her body. Simply by his touch, Trivakra was suddenly transformed into an exquisitely beautiful woman with straight, evenly proportioned limbs and large hips and breasts. Now endowed with beauty, character, and generosity, Trivakra began to feel lusty desires for Krishna. Taking hold of the end of his upper cloth, she smiled and addressed him as follows. She said, "Come, O hero, let us go to my home. I cannot bear to leave you here. O best of men, please take pity on me since you have agitated my mind." Krishna glanced at the face of Balaram, his brother, who was watching the incident, and then at all the faces of all the cowherd boys that they had come with, their friends. And then with a laugh, Krishna replied, "O lady with beautiful eyebrows, as soon as I fulfill my purpose, I will certainly visit your home, where men can relieve their anxiety. Indeed, you are the best refuge for us homeless travelers." So this woman might have been a prostitute. I'm not very sure of that, but I think there's a good chance she was. Leaving her with those sweet words, Krishna walked further down the road. The merchants along the way worshipped him and his elder brother by presenting them with various wonderful offerings, including pan, garlands, and fragrant substances. The sight of Krishna aroused Cupid in the hearts of the women of Mathura city. Agitated, they forgot themselves. Their clothes, braids, and bangles became disheveled, and they stood as still as figures in a painting. Krishna then asked the local people, where was the arena in which the bow sacrifice was going to take place? So he'd heard about this bow sacrifice that was going to take place, and there was a bow there that no one could string. So he's asking people, where is this happening? And then when they showed him, he went there. And he saw this amazing bow which resembled that of Indra. Now, for those of you that remember our earlier pastimes, you'll know who's Indra. There's been a lot of talk about him on this in the Bhagavatam. But just to remind you, there's a picture of Indra. He's considered the king of the demigods, of the devas. And so, clearly, if he has a bow, he's going to be a very opulent bow. And I don't know if this was Indra's bow, but it resembled the bow of Indra. So this most opulent bow was guarded by a large company of soldiers and men who were worshipping it. Krishna rushed his way forward, and despite the guards' attempts to stop him, he went and picked up the bow. Now, most people couldn't even pick up the bow. It was that, something mystical about it. Easily lifting the bow with his left hand, he strung it in a fraction of a second. As the king's guards looked on, and he then powerfully pulled the string and snapped the bow in half. Just broke it, just as an excited elephant might break a stalk of sugarcane. The sound of the bow's breaking filled the earth and sky in all directions. And upon hearing it, the king who was in his palace, King Kans, was struck with terror. The enraged guards then took up their weapons, and wanting to seize Krishna and his companions, they surrounded them and shouted, "Grab him, kill him!" It wasn't so easy. It wasn't going to be so easy at all. Seeing the guards coming to kill them, Balaram and Krishna took up the two halves of the bow and began striking them down. So here are some pictures of that. Balaram and Krishna took up the two halves of the bow and began striking down the soldiers. After killing all the soldiers sent by Kans, Krishna and Balaram left the sacrificial arena by its main gate and continued through the city, happily looking at all the opulent sights. Having witnessed the amazing deed Krishna and Balaram had performed, and seeing their strength, boldness, and beauty, the people of the city thought, these must be two prominent demigods or devas. They didn't know who Krishna really is. They didn't know that he's the supreme Godhead, the supreme being who had come to earth exactly for this purpose, to annihilate the evil rulers. Now, as Krishna and Balaram strolled about at will, the sun began to set. So they left the city with their friends, the cowherd boys, and returned to their encampment. So they and their families are all camped outside the city of Mathura. And the boys, Krishna returned there. At the time of Krishna's departure from Vrindavan, when he had left his home of Vrindavan, the gopis, the girls in Vrindavan, had foretold that the residents of Mathura, the city, would enjoy many benedictions. And now the gopis' predictions were coming true. For those residents were gazing upon the beauty of Krishna, the jewel among men. Indeed, Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, desired the shelter of that beauty so much that she abandoned all other men, although they worshipped her. See, everybody wants wealth, and everybody worships wealth. That's Lakshmi. Lakshmi abandoned all other men, all other people who worship her, to be with Krishna, because she understood he is the source, the fountainhead of all true wealth. That supreme being is the source of everything. That supreme Godhead, that Lord of all lords, that master of the universe is Sri Krishna, as declared by all the Vedas and as is being proven by his pastimes. After Krishna and Balaram's feet were bathed, so that they got home, they bathed the family members and other people who were there, bathed their feet, and Krishna and Balaram ate rice with milk. Then although knowing what Kans intended to do, so they knew what the king intended to do and the whole setup that was there for the next day, they spent the night comfortably resting. Meanwhile, the king, Kans, wasn't having such a great time. You see, the story with Kans had begun a long time back, when Krishna was born. Kans is seen over here, where he's about to kill his sister Devaki, because he's heard an omen from the sky. In the sky, he's heard this voice saying that her son, Devaki, his sister, who had just got married, and that's her husband next to her, her son was going to kill Kans. Kans was the king. Kans was also her brother. And the omen had said that her son was going to kill Kans. So the king said, let me just kill her right now so that, her son can't harm me. So Kans was terrified. Now, the story is very long, so I won't go into the details here. But the next thing that happened was he put Devaki and Vasudeva into jail, and ultimately, after killing 6 of their children, the 7th was supposedly a miscarriage, but actually wasn't, the 8th was born, and that 8th was Krishna. When Krishna was born, he was a baby, and his parents were worried because they were in a jail. They were worried that the king was going to come and kill the baby again, just like he'd killed 6 of the other children. But at that point, Krishna showed his real form as Vishnu and reassured them that the king couldn't harm him at all. There's nothing he could do. And at that point, Vasudeva, the father of baby Krishna, took him out of the jail. The doors opened, the guards went to sleep. Vasudeva took him out, put him into a friend's home across the river, Nanda, and then brought back Nanda's baby girl, thinking that the king Kans would not kill a little girl. But that's exactly what happened. Kans, in fact, killed the baby girl, and as he tried to kill her, she flew up into the sky and appeared as goddess Durga and told him that the one who is going to kill you has already taken birth. And so the king was now even more terrified. King Kans was terrified. So he sent all kinds of people to try and kill Krishna. And all those attempts had been unsuccessful. So then he finally sent Krishna's uncle Akrura to bring Krishna to Mathura, and he was planning to have him killed. Now, in that attempt, he had his guards attack Krishna already. They'd been unsuccessful. Krishna had broken the bow that was there. And so now Kansa was going to play out the next part of his thing. But that night when he saw the power Krishna had in killing all his guards and in breaking that bow, he was terrified. That night, he realized that Krishna had killed all his guards, just as if he was playing a game. And the king Kans remained awake for a long time. And both while awake and while dreaming, he saw many bad omens and messengers of death. When he looked at his reflection, he could not see his head. For no reason, the moon and stars appeared double. He saw a hole in his shadow. He could not hear the sound of his own breath, his life air. The trees seemed covered with a golden hue, and he could not see his footprints. He dreamt that he was being embraced by ghosts, that he was riding a donkey and drinking poison, and also that a naked man smeared with oil was passing by wearing a garland of flowers. Seeing these and other such omens, both while dreaming and while awake, Kans was terrified by the prospect of death, and out of anxiety he could not sleep. When the night had finally passed and the sun rose, Kans set about arranging for the grand wrestling festival. So there was a big festival he'd arranged. Kans's men performed the ritual worship of the wrestling arena, sounded their drums and other instruments, and decorated the viewing galleries. So there was a whole arena, right, with viewing galleries, and they were decorated now with garlands and flags and ribbons and arches just to make it seem really festive. But he had a sinister plan. The city dwellers and residents of the outlying districts came and sat down comfortably in the galleries. The royal guests received special seats. Surrounded by his ministers, the king, Kans, took his seat on the imperial dais. And even as he sat amidst his various provincial rulers, his heart trembled. While the musical instruments loudly played in rhythmic meters appropriate for wrestling matches, the lavishly ornamented wrestlers proudly entered the arena with their coaches and sat down. So now these were really powerful big men, and they were going to wrestle. The plan was they were going to wrestle with Krishna and Balaram, who were small young boys, 11 years old. Enthused by the pleasing music, the wrestlers Chanur and Mushtik, Kuta, Shala and Toshala sat down on the wrestling mat. As for Krishna's family members, King Nanda, the other cowherd men who had come from the village of Vrindavan, they were summoned by the king of the Bhojas, Kans, to present him with their offerings, which they did, and then they took their seats in one of the galleries. Now, Krishna and Balaram, on hearing all the sounds coming from the arena, all the kettle drums resounding, went there to see what was happening. When the Supreme Godhead, Sri Krishna, reached the entrance to the arena, he saw there was an elephant waiting to greet him. His name was Kovalyapida. This elephant was blocking his way at the urging of his keeper, the elephant keeper. Securely binding up his clothes, Krishna now securely bound up his clothes and tying back his curly locks, Krishna addressed the elephant keeper with words as grave as the rumbling of a cloud. Move aside at once and let us pass. If you don't, this very day I will send both you and your elephant to the abode of death. Thus threatened, the elephant keeper became angry. He goaded his furious elephant, who appeared like death personified, goaded him into attacking Krishna. The lord of the elephants, Kovalyapida, then charged at Krishna and violently seized him with his trunk. But Krishna slipped away, struck him a blow, and disappeared from his view among his legs. Infuriated at being unable to see Krishna, the elephant sought him out with his sense of smell, using his trunk. Once again, Kovalyapida seized the Supreme Lord with the end of his trunk, but Krishna forcefully freed himself. So Krishna loves to play these games. He loves it, absolutely delights in it. He did that with Kaliya also, if you remember the earlier episode of Kaliya. Let Kaliya grab him, right? And then played with him, and then finally got himself free, and then danced on the hoods of Kaliya. Well, in this case, something similar was going to happen. Krishna then grabbed the powerful elephant Kuvalyapida by the tail and forcefully dragged him 25 bow lengths. So I imagine that's about 25 meters or about 75 feet. Dragged him for about 75 feet as easily as Garuda, the mighty bird of Vishnu, might drag a snake. As Krishna held on to the elephant's tail, the animal began to twist away to the left and to the right, making Krishna swerve in the opposite direction. And as a young boy would swerve when pulling a calf by the tail. So Krishna was pulling the elephant just as one might pull, as he used to do when he was a baby. He'd pull the calf by the tail and then go along with the calf. Krishna then came face to face with the elephant and slapped him and ran away. Kuvalyapida the elephant pursued Krishna, managing to touch him again and again with each step. But Krishna outmaneuvered the elephant and made him trip and fall. As Krishna dodged about, he playfully fell on the ground and quickly got up again. The raging elephant, thinking Krishna was down, tried to gore him with his tusks, but struck the earth instead. Krishna was very fast, if you haven't guessed. His prowess foiled, the lordly elephant Kuvalyapida went into a frenzied rage out of frustration, but the elephant keepers goaded him on and furiously charged Krishna once again. This time, the Supreme Lord confronted the elephant as he attacked. Seizing his trunk with one hand, Krishna threw him to the ground. He then climbed onto the elephant with the ease of a mighty lion and pulled out one of the tusks of the elephant, and with it killed the beast and his keepers. Leaving the dead elephant aside, Krishna held on to the tusk and entered the wrestling arena. With the tusk resting on his shoulder, drops of elephant blood and sweat sprinkled all over him, and his lotus face covered with the fine drops of his own perspiration. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna shone with great beauty. His brother Balaram, who is no less than Krishna, was also carrying one of the elephant's tusks on his shoulder as his chosen weapon. He entered the arena. Both of them entered the arena with their friends, the cowherd boys. The various groups of people in the arena regarded Krishna in different ways when he entered. The wrestlers saw Krishna as a lightning bolt. The men of Mathura saw him as the best of men. The women saw him as Cupid personified, and the cowherd men of Vrindavan saw him as their relative. The impious rulers saw him as a chastiser, and his parents saw him as their child. The unintelligent saw him as his universal form. The yogis saw him as the absolute truth, and the Vrishnis as their supreme worshipable deity. That's his own dynasty. And Kans, the king of the Bhoja dynasty, saw him as the lord of death. When Kans saw that the elephant Kuvalyapida was dead, because this was a huge elephant, and he would have just crushed anyone under his feet, but Krishna had killed him and pulled out his tusks. When he saw that, because he saw the tusks and he saw them in his Krishna's hand, he realized that the two brothers were invincible, and he became overwhelmed with anxiety. Krishna and Balaram were dressed like a pair of excellently costumed actors. The two mighty armed brothers shone splendidly in the arena. Indeed, they overpowered the minds of all onlookers with their blazing effulgence. As the citizens of the city and the people from outlying districts gazed upon Krishna and Balaram from their seats in the galleries, their happiness caused their eyes to open wide and their faces to blossom. They drank in the vision of the Supreme Lord's face without becoming satiated. See, so many people who think that God is impersonal believe that he has no form. But the truth is, God has a form. And that form is the object of the supreme beauty. That form is not material. And so in a sense, they're right in saying he has no form. He has no material form. He has a spiritual form. And that spiritual form is far more beautiful than the most beautiful man or woman you could come across on this planet or perhaps on any planet. It is the epitome of beauty. So the people around seem to be drinking Krishna and Balaram with their eyes, licking them with their tongues, smelling them with their nostrils, and embracing them with their arms. Imagine a person who believes that God has no form. What are they missing out on? What is this incredible thing that they're missing out on? And one who has embraced this idea, Krishna says, one who knows the divine nature of my appearance and activities in this world never takes birth again, never comes back to this temporary and miserable place. Reminded of the Supreme Lord's beauty, character, charm, and bravery, the members of the audience began describing these features to one another according to what they had seen and heard. And so they started talking amongst each other, describing the glories of Krishna and how he had killed the various demons like Putana and Trinavarta, and how he had pulled down the twin Arjun trees, and all the different incredible things. He'd swallowed a forest fire, and he'd subdued the serpent Kaliya with his many hoods. And he had removed Indra's false pride by holding Govardhan hill with one hand, with the left hand, the pinky of his left hand, holding the entire hill on his little finger for an entire week, thus protecting the inhabitants of Gokul from rain and wind and hail. And they talked about how the gopis overcame all kinds of distress. The cowherd women overcame all kinds of distress, experienced great happiness by seeing his face, which is always cheerful and smiling, with smiling glances and ever free of fatigue. It is said, they were whispering amongst each other, that his full protection of the Yadu dynasty will become extremely famous and attain wealth, glory, and power. And they also were saying amongst themselves that his elder brother Balaram possessed all transcendental opulences as well. That he had killed Pralamba and Vatsak and Baka and many other demons. And while the people talked in this way, musical instruments resounded. The wrestlers, Charuna, addressed Krishna and Balaram with the following words. So now we have Chanur saying to Krishna, he's one of the wrestlers who Kans had selected. Kans was confident, this wrestler is so powerful, nobody can defeat him. He will kill Krishna. So Chanur says to Krishna, O son of Nanda, O Balaram, you too are well respected by courageous men and are both skillful at wrestling. Having heard of your prowess, the king has called you here, wanting to see for himself. Subjects of the king who try to please him with their thoughts, acts, and words are sure to achieve good fortune. But those who fail to do so will suffer the opposite fate. Now the king had instructed both of these wrestlers, you have to kill Krishna. In fact, there were 5 wrestlers there. Just in case these two, Krishna was able to destroy 2 of them, and Balaram were able to kill these 2, well, there were 3 more waiting. One way or the other, the boys had to be killed. That was the order. And now the wrestler Chanur continues. It is well known that cowherd boys are always joyful as they tend their calves and when they playfully wrestle with each other while grazing their animals in the various forests. Therefore, let us do what the king wants us to do for the pleasure of all those assembled. Hearing this, Krishna, who liked to wrestle, is a really big clue as to his nature. He likes to wrestle. He welcomed the challenge and replied, although we are forest dwellers, we are also subjects of the king. We must gratify his desires, for such behavior will confer upon us the greatest benefit. We are just young boys and should play with those of equal strength, because that's the way of dharma, right? People of equal strength are matched. You know, even in wrestling or in boxing, you have featherweight with featherweight, and you have heavyweight with heavyweight. So people should wrestle and fight with their equals, right? That's what Krishna is pointing out. The wrestling match, however, must go on properly so that Adharma or irreligion does not taint the respectable members of the audience. See, what was being done here was adharma, was irreligion. It was against the practices of Vedic culture, where of fairness, of what is just. But, Krishna says, doesn't matter. We're going to go on anyway. So Chanur, the wrestler, says, you aren't really a child or even a young man, and neither is Balaram your brother. He is the strongest. You are the strongest of the strong. After all, you playfully killed an elephant who had the strength of 1,000 other elephants. Therefore, you too should fight powerful wrestlers like us. There is certainly nothing unfair about that. You may show your prowess against me, and Balaram can fight with Mushtik. With that, Krishna accepted the challenge. And he paired off with Chanur and Balaram with Mushtik. Seizing each other's hands and locking legs with each other, the opponents struggled powerfully, eager for victory. They each struck fists against fists, knees against knees, head against and chest against chest. Each fighter contended with his opponent by dragging him about in circles, shoving and crushing him, throwing him down and running before and behind him, forcefully lifting and carrying each other, pushing each other away and holding each other down. The fighters hurt even their own bodies in their great eagerness for victory. All the women present considered the match an unfair fight between the strong and the weak, and they felt extreme anxiety due to compassion. They assembled in groups around the arena and spoke to one another as follows. What a greatly irreligious and unfair act the members of this royal assembly are committing. As the king watches this fight between the strong and the weak, they also want to see it. What comparison can there be between these two professional wrestlers with limbs as strong as lightning bolts and bodies resembling mighty mountains, and these two young immature boys with exceedingly tender limbs? So you can feel their empathy and their compassion, and they're feeling terrible. And they're saying that a wise person would not enter an assembly like this if he knew that the participants were committing acts of impropriety. And with that, they're like talking amongst each other. And they say, just see the lotus face of Krishna as he darts around his foe. That face covered with drops of perspiration brought on by the strenuous fight resembles a lotus covered with dew. Don't you see the face of Balaram with his eyes copper red from his anger towards Mushtik, and his beauty enhanced by his laughter and his absorption in the fight? And then they start thinking about the ladies of Vrindavan and how pious must be those ladies, how fortunate they must be that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, disguising himself with human traits, wanders about, enacting his many pastimes, adorned with wonderful forest garlands. He whose feet are worshipped by Shiva and the goddess Rama vibrates his flute as he tends the cows in the company of his brother Balaram. What austerities must those ladies of Vrindavan have performed! With their eyes, they always drink the nectar of Krishna's form, which is the essence of loveliness and is not to be equaled or surpassed. So in this way, they're going on talking about Krishna. That form of his is the only abode of beauty, fame, and opulence. It is self-perfect, ever fresh, and extremely rare. The ladies of Vrindavan are the most fortunate of women because with their minds fully attached to Krishna and their throats always choked up with tears, they constantly sing about him while milking the cows, churning butter, gathering cow dung for fuel, riding on swings, taking care of their babies. And they just say their exalted devotion, they automatically acquire all desirable things. When they hear this flute, as he leaves Vrindavan in the morning with his cows or returns to them at sunset, the young girls come out of their houses to see him. They must have performed many pious activities in their past lives to be able to see him as he walks on the road, his smiling face mercifully glancing upon them. Now, Krishna's parents were also there, and Devaki and Vasudeva, who had been imprisoned all these years. So if Krishna was 11 years old, and he'd also, before that, his parents had had 7 children. That means they'd been in jail now around 18 years. They'd been allowed to come out to see this wrestling match, or maybe not, but they were hearing about it. They became overwhelmed with sorrow when they heard the women's fearful statements. They grieved, not knowing their son's strength. They had no idea that Krishna and Balaram were so powerful, or that these wrestlers were no match for them. So meanwhile, Krishna, the master of all mystic power, made up his mind to kill his opponent. Balaram and Mushtik, expertly displaying numerous wrestling techniques, battled each other in the same way that Krishna and his opponent did. The harsh blows from the Supreme Lord's limbs fell like crushing lightning bolts upon Chanur, breaking every part of his body and causing him more and more pain and fatigue. Furious, Chanur attacked Krishna with the speed of a hawk and struck his chest with both fists. No more shaken by the demon's mighty blows than an elephant struck with a flower garland, Krishna grabbed Chanur by his arms, swung him around several times, and hurled him to the ground with great force. Krishna's clothes and hair and garlands scattering the wrestler fell down dead. Similarly, Mushtik struck Balaram with his fist and was slain. Receiving a violent blow from mighty Balaram's palm, the demon trembled all over in great pain, vomited blood, and then fell lifeless to the ground. Confronted next by the wrestler, so now when these two were dead, the other wrestlers came to attack Krishna and Balaram. Kuta attacked Balaram, the best of fighters, and Balaram just playfully and nonchalantly killed him with his left fist. Then Krishna kicked in Shala's head and tore Toshala in half, and both wrestlers fell down dead. Chanur, Mushtik, Kuta, Shala, and Toshala, all 5 of them, having been killed, the remaining wrestlers all fled for their lives. Krishna and Balaram then called their young cowherd boyfriends to join them, and in their company all the boys danced, their ankle bells resounding as musical instruments played. Everyone except the king, Kans, rejoiced at the wonderful feat Krishna and Balaram had performed. The exalted Brahmins and great saints exclaimed, "Excellent, excellent, wah, wah." King Kans, seeing that his best wrestlers had all been killed or had fled, stopped the musical performance originally meant for his pleasure and said, "Drive the 2 wicked sons of Vasudeva out of the city, confiscate the cowherds' property, and arrest the fool Nanda," that's Krishna's father. "Kill the most evil Vasudeva, his birth father, and also kill my father, Ugrasen, along with all his followers, who have all sided with our enemies." As Kans thus raved, and so audaciously, the infallible Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, intensely angry, quickly and easily jumped onto the high royal dais. Seeing Krishna approaching like death personified, the quick-witted Kans instantly rose from his seat and took up his sword and shield. Sword in hand, Kans moved quickly from side to side like a hawk in the sky. Kans was very powerful, by the way. He was an extremely powerful fighter. No one could defeat him. No one could defeat him. He was incredibly powerful and evil and demoniac. But Krishna, whose fearsome strength is irresistible, powerfully seized the demon just as an eagle might capture a snake. Grabbing Kans by the hair and knocking off his crown, Krishna threw him off the elevated dais onto the wrestling mat. And then the Supreme Lord, the source and shelter of the entire universe, threw himself upon the king. As a lion drags a dead elephant, Krishna dragged Kans's dead body around the ground in full view of everyone present. All the people in the arena tumultuously cried out, "Oh my God, oh." Kans had always been disturbed by the thought that Krishna was going to kill him. This is something not everybody knew. He had been disturbed by the thought that Krishna was going to kill him. Therefore, when drinking, eating, moving about, sleeping, or even breathing, the king had always seen the Supreme Lord before him with his disc and weapon in hand. Thus Kans received the rare boon of attaining liberation. What happened there was, as Krishna killed Kans, his soul went and merged with the body of Krishna. He attained liberation, mukti, nirvana, mukti, from the cycle of birth and death. Not only that, he received the rare boon of attaining liberation and received a form just like Vishnu. This is called Sarupya Mukti, where one has the same form as that of the Lord. Why was that? It's a very important point to understand. In all his hate, the king, Kans, had been meditating on Krishna. You see, if you meditate on God with love, or you meditate on him with hate, it doesn't matter. Hate is a very powerful meditation. And one who meditates on God in any way becomes purified. In fact, Kans had become so purified that when Krishna finally killed him, he gave him liberation. What to say of some of those who love him? What to say of those who could not be separated from him for even a moment? We all have that opportunity to be able to love Krishna because he is so incredibly wonderful. Not only in the way he protects us from demons like this, but also just in his pure, beautiful character. At this point now, Kansa's 8 younger brothers, led by Kanka, Nayagrodhak, and others, attacked Krishna and Balaram in a rage. So, your own family member has been killed. You're going to, try to avenge that. And they wanted to avenge their brother's death. And as they ran swiftly, ready to strike, Balaram slew them with his club, just as a lion easily kills other animals. At that time, kettle drums resounded in the sky as Brahma, Shiva, and other devas, the demigods, rained down flowers with pleasure. They chanted the Supreme Lord's praises, and their wives danced with great happiness. Meanwhile, the wives of Kans and his brothers, aggrieved by the death of their well-wishing husbands, came forward with tearful eyes, beating their heads, embracing their husbands who lay on a hero's final bed. The sorrowful women loudly lamented while shedding constant tears. "O my master," speaking to their husbands, "O dear one, O kind and compassionate protector of the shelterless, by your being slain we have also been slain, together with your household and offspring. O great hero amongst men, bereft of you this city has lost its beauty just as we have, and all our festivity and good fortune within it have come to an end. O dear one, you have been brought to this state because of the terrible violence you committed against innocent creatures." Their own wives are saying this to them, that this has happened to you because of the terrible violence you committed against innocent creatures. See, karma, no one escapes from karma. When you commit violent acts against innocent creatures or innocent beings or innocent people, karma is going to get you. How can one who harms others attain happiness? It's an important line to understand. When you harm other living beings, be it an animal, be it a human, or be it even yourself, how can one who harms others attain happiness? Krishna causes the appearance and disappearance of all beings in this world. See, they knew who he is. And he is their maintainer as well. One who disrespects him can never prosper happily. See, when their husbands were alive, these women could never have spoken to them because these men were so controlling, so dominating, would have suppressed them so much that they could never have spoken these words. But now that their husbands were dead, they could speak their heart. After consoling the royal ladies, Krishna, the sustainer of all the worlds, arranged for the prescribed funeral rites to be performed. Then Krishna and Balaram released their mother and father from bondage and offered their respects and obeisances to them, touching their feet with their heads. Their birth, so they were the ones who had raised Krishna and Balaram were Nanda and Yashoda. But their birth parents, Devaki and Vasudev, had been in the jail all this time, for the last 17 years. Now, Krishna and Balaram were finally meeting their parents. Their parents were finally meeting their sons who were grown up. Devaki and Vasudev, now knowing Krishna and Balaram to be the lords of the universe, simply stood with joined palms. Being apprehensive, they did not embrace their sons. Now that's the difference between these two, Vasudeva and Devaki. They had seen that when baby Krishna was born, that he was in fact Vishnu, the Supreme Being. But when Nanda and Yashoda received baby Krishna, they just thought of him as their child, as their baby. And so Krishna enjoyed wonderful pastimes with Nanda and Yashoda. All his childhood leela, all his childhood pastimes were enjoyed there. And now he was going to be back with his birth parents, Vasudeva and Devaki. And they were in a place of awe and reverence. That's why they joined their palms, namaste, and in great awe and reverence acknowledged the Supreme Being who had come to them as their son. For Nanda and Yashoda, the ones who raised Krishna and Balaram, this was not the Supreme Being, he was their baby. They just loved him for who he is, and that's how Krishna likes it. Krishna likes to be loved. God likes to be loved for who he is. There are two ways in which to approach God. You can approach him as God is great and be in a place of awe and reverence. Or you can have a real relationship with him where there is no one greater and no one smaller. Or he is just as you are. You can have an intimate relationship. In Vrindavan, Krishna's hometown where he's just come from, the cowherd boys will climb on his shoulders. They will steal his lunch. Krishna will take the food out of their mouth and put it in his mouth, something that is absolutely not done. The gopis will wait for him in the middle of night. He will come there and he will kiss them. This is intimacy. His mother will run after him with a stick to beat him when he's been naughty. This is the way he likes to be loved. He likes to be loved for who he is. And so he shows us his nature, his mischievousness, his playfulness, and even his love for wrestling, as you see out here today. He shows us who he is. And just as we like to be loved for who we are, even if you're a very rich person, if you're a multimillionaire, if you're a billionaire, if you're the most powerful person on earth, when you go home, you want to be loved for who you are, which means being loved with all your flaws, with all your good and bad qualities. That's the only kind of love that's real. Otherwise, it's not love. Otherwise, it's just some kind of an arrangement, some kind of a, you need your needs met, or you want someone to protect you or take care of you or whatever else it might be. Or it's a social duty or responsibility, or it's just a way to be there because you can't be alone. But real love is when you can accept each other as you are, unconditionally. It's very hard to do. I don't think most of us know how to do it. I don't think most of us can. But it is with God that we begin that experience. It is with God that we can start to practice loving unconditionally. Because everything about him is madhuram, is sweet. He is the Lord of sweetness. And everything about him is sweet. His face is sweet, his eyes are sweet, his walking is sweet, his words are sweet. Everything about him is sweet and delicious and delightful. So with that, we come to the end of today's reading. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you're joining later on after the live cast, And you have any comments, please write them down. I'd love to answer your questions. I look forward to your questions, and I look forward to hearing from you. We're here every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time and 10 p.m. Eastern. And if you're in India, it's 7:30 a.m. on Wednesdays. And I think that's going to change now, and daylight savings time happens, and that'll move up to 8:30. But I will announce it at that time. All right, if there are no questions, then I wish you all good night. Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna. See you next week.